Hey everyone, welcome to The Last Few Spins. My name is Joey and I'm very excited to be talking about the artist featured in today's video, Ethel Cain. So her previous release, Preacher's Daughter, was actually my favorite album of the year back in 2022. The artistry and vision within that album was something that kept me engaged for a very long time once I discovered it. So whenever I heard that she was going to have a new album here in early 2025, I was very excited to be able to listen to that and see what she would be doing next. So this video I'll be going over my thoughts and some just overall discussion about Ethel Cain's brand new album titled Perverts. So if you clicked on this video, I'm going to assume that you already know who Ethel Cain is. But just to freshen up on the background of this ethereal sounding artist, Ethel Cain is actually more of an identity or a character constructed by artist Hayden Anadonia. As far as I know, she has plans for somewhat of a sprawling story arc that will be fulfilled down the road regarding the Ethel Cain persona, but this new entry is quite a change in musical direction compared to what we have heard from her in the past. It feels very meditative and erotic in nature, but I'm sure there are some challenges being felt in terms of those who are trying to get into this album, but just can't find their way around the dreamlike abrasiveness that is Perverts. So my goal is to dive into those dynamics of how this new album sounds versus some of her previous works and discuss how this may negatively impact her fan base that may have climbed aboard the bandwagon based on some of her more popular tracks that emerged in recent years from her. With that being said, she has an incredibly strong and loyal fan base that appreciates her art at its purest form and will go to bat for her in an instant, especially as many fans have deeply become obsessed with the lore of Ethel Cain. So one thing that fuels this is that she is very transparent on her YouTube channel and her social media pages. I feel like the communication between her and her fans is kind of a healthy one in terms of how she will just get on her YouTube channel and just kind of talk about really anything, maybe a dream that she had or just some different thoughts or whatever, and it makes it really easy for those fans that want to keep up with her to kind of know more about the artist herself. So following the release of Ethel Cain's masterpiece, Preacher's Daughter, in 2022, an increase in fame followed close behind as infectious upbeat tracks like American Teenager and the sprawling ballads House in Nebraska and Thoroughfare captured a whole new swath of attention from people who would now be intrigued with the artist herself. In that first album, we did see glimpses of the ambiance that would feature on her new album, Perverts, with instrumental tracks like August Underground and Televangelism, although there was a sense of letting go within those, but the songs within her new release seems more like they're holding on for dear life. I expect this Perverts album to catch some fans off guard, as her new entry is certainly a challenge to understand and may not be as accessible to the masses because of some of the qualities about it that I'll discuss later in the video. It's refreshing to see an artist such as Ethel Cain be driven to evolve and follow the direction that her heart desires as she progresses through her career. Even if it's an ambient-heavy collection of tracks like the one we find on her new album, it could have been easy for her to produce some more of those anthems and ballads that captured so many of us before. But you have to admire someone that doesn't cave to that type of expectation. The vibes from this new album are somewhat bleak, so as an artist such as Ethel Cain that wears her heart on her sleeve, perhaps we are seeing through the window to her soul as she lays it all on the line. I don't feel like she is the type of person to pull any punches or take any shortcuts to appease anyone, so when we hear some of these new distant, haunting tracks that don't necessarily have much in terms of melody, we have to understand and respect that this is simply what she's feeling. I did listen to this album 3 times, even with it being an hour and a half long. My first impression was that it was somewhat unsettling, which can be a good thing in an odd way, but many elements of this one can be tedious, as there's a lot of extended repetition of the same experimental sounds. Some of these tracks seem to dip in and out of consciousness, but always reawaken with the beginning of the next track, and with repeated listens I found myself becoming more comfortable with what this actually is. But I still have more questions than I have answers with this new album. I get where these type of ambient songs come from artistically, because in my studio I found myself just throwing on an echoey, dark guitar tone and just noodling for a few minutes. There's something therapeutic about creating that type of music, although sometimes it's more difficult to take in from the outside. Even though for us, the creator, it sometimes clicks with us immediately, sometimes as a listener it doesn't, but it's worth it to be patient and not dismiss something based on the first few minutes you hear, because often there are special things in there that a fresh set of ears may easily miss. The opening track, Perverts, is perhaps the hardest one to get into within the whole album, which doesn't help in this era where our attention spans are kind of short, and for it to lead off the album, Ethel Cain really quizzes us hard on if we're ready for this. I'm unsure how some of her new fame from singles like Crush and American Teenager affected her, but if it was making her uncomfortable, perhaps the ultimate way to weed out some people would be to do exactly what she did on this opening track. I always keep an open mind about these types of things, but I have to say this one in particular kind of wastes our time with several minutes of really nothing. I can't even call it ambient music, it's just kind of this drony noise that doesn't evolve much throughout. Every once in a while you'll catch some underwater sounding mumbling or some reverby siren effect, but there's not really much good to say about this opening title track, to be honest, even with listening to it through an open mind. Punish is the next track on the album, sounding closest to her earlier era than anything else within this release. This one gives some Lana Del Rey vibes just with the note selection on the piano reminding me some of the standard slower Lana tracks. Punish also has a nice build about 4 minutes in where we get some of that sweet Ethel Cain guitar distortion that feels like it's capturing every bit of room on a frequency scale at once. So at this point in the third track, I was hoping that the noise that we got at the beginning of this album was just an anomaly, as we seem to settle into something a little more palatable with Punish. However, in Housofpsychoticwomn, just one word, we're greeted with this drony type of noise that kind of revolves into this repetitive swirl, and after a while it becomes pretty nauseating. This one feels like you're in the middle of this like giant fan where the blade just keeps like whooshing by and it's just like blowing air in your ear. It's just something about it. It's not quite appealing, I guess. And it's something that certainly didn't need to be 13 minutes long, so it's just a little excessive with how abstract it is. Vacillator is the next one that sort of feels like a cigarettes after sex track, especially with the not so subtle sexual lyrics within that one. This drifts in and out of the noise style that she drives home for most of the album, but when she's singing along to some light percussion, it works really well and feels like you're in a comfortable candlelit room until passing out occasionally into the ambient dream state of the song. Within the track Onanist, there's a simple little guitar build that emerges into this heavily distorted, scratchy segment of the song that eventually retreats back into sort of a windy sounding recording of Ethel Cain repeating the words "it feels good." Once I googled the meaning of the word onanist from the title, that certainly seemed to clarify things a bit. But once again, something that's not exactly accessible and not so sure that it really moves the needle much for me. So clocking in at 15 minutes, Pulldrone lists a series of 12 stanzas that each introduce a word that's kind of the focal point of the next few lines, using words such as curiosity, resentment, desolation, to name a few. This is interesting to follow along with if you have some time to sit and read the lyrics, but don't expect much repeatability out of it because it's really just her talking, followed by some uneasy instrumentals that kind of resemble more of a evacuation alarm than actual music. But then the seventh track, titled Etienne, is kind of pretty, and it seems to serve as a release valve in the album to kind of wake up from this darkness that has seemingly been fogged up around us within the previous tracks. A real quiet pad effect sets in throughout that still maintains that bit of an unhinged aura, but the piano playing in this one is really touching and one of my favorite parts of this album. I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation of this next song title, as I'm pretty sure it's just a word that Ethel Cain made up, but we're going to give it our best shot anyway. So if Etienne is you waking up, Thatorchia makes you feel like you've been transported to this empty white office building with fluorescent lights as far as you can see, where you're not sure where you're at or necessarily how you should feel. I listened to this song and it brings somewhat of a nervous energy back into the frame until she comes in to layer some wordless vocals over top of some fuzz. Her vocal work in this one is something that I actually really enjoy about Ethel Cain's art as a whole, in terms of how she can convey an emotion within just some extended notes. The final track, Amber Waves, very much feels like the afterglow of the album. Like you've been through this thing and now you're reflecting on it. A really gorgeous sounding track to complete this album that features some subtle acoustic guitar at the beginning as she tells us she'll be alright. These are some lyrics that I'd love to have a better understanding of. I enjoy them quite a bit as they seem very personal to her. There were some lyrics in earlier tracks that conveyed hurt and pain, but oddly this song feels more numb than anything. The usage of the word numb to describe some lyrics, might be kind of a negative thing in some way, but if the tone of the song matches that, then I feel like it can be a positive. So with all this being said, I can't say that I was just expecting another Preacher's Daughter type of album, because I know that Ethel Cain is the type of artist that is going to evolve, and I certainly respect that about her. However, I do miss some of the more traditional alternative tracks that she has done before because, let's face it, she's done them really well. However, I do understand how this material could be enriching to those who find peace in some of the calmer moments. For all the moments that I kind of struggle with because of their abrasiveness and lack of melody, I can definitely get behind the calm and meditative nature of a lot of this. So in terms of judging this new album, it's really hard to give it like a score because you have to take into account like the mental misdirections of knowing that you appreciate the artistic endeavor that she's doing, but also not completely enjoying it. Given all of what I said there and before, I'm giving this a rating of 2 stars out of 5. Just not something I'll go back to much, but this score isn't a diss to Ethel Cain, the artist, because ultimately I still want to follow what she does in her career, and I'd love to see her perform live given the chance. I do like how this album breathes and feels multi-dimensional, but so much of this just made me feel like I was anchored by all this anxious energy within it, and it felt relentless at times. Earlier I wondered if there may be some newer fans of hers that will probably sour on Ethel Cain after hearing Perverts for maybe both the first and last time. If you are one of those people but still clicked upon this video to see how someone else felt about it, or to either further establish your thoughts or totally disagree with me, just know although this album may not be for me, I'm still a big fan of Ethel Cain, and I'm an even bigger fan of the risks that she's willing to take to put out art that she resonates with, even if it's not what is expected of her. So just give it another chance because it's worth capturing the essence of it at the very least. Perverts by Ethel Cain is certainly not a rock record, but the act of releasing it is more punk rock than most anything else out there.